Good morning. This morning I'm interviewing Ron Clark, who's a professor emerita of chemistry and biochemistry. Ron is the 7th person that I've interviewed in this project. Welcome.
Thank you.
What brought you to FSU?
I left graduate school and went into industry, thinking I'd never want to touch a lecture ever again, be a lecturer. But somewhere along the line I found that the industry research was not the challenge I was looking for, and I decided I wasn't quite so afraid of the classroom as I thought I would be as I was in graduate school. And so, looking around for something different and leaving industry, I interviewed about a half a dozen different universities, and the best offer I got in terms of the research I wanted to do was from Florida State. So that got me here. And it could be a little bit that Buffalo, New York winters had something to do with leaving and coming to Florida, but we'll leave that alone.
So what year was that?
That was in 1962, the fall of 1962. Rob Lee Light and I came in almost at exactly the same day.
And who was your department chair then?
Earl Frieden was the department chair, and in my division, Greg Chopin, he was my host during the interview process, and Jim Qualiano, a member of the inorganic division at the time, and also Ray Sheeline. So it was a very small division at the time.
So you made the 5th one then, or 4th?
I made the 4th one.
4th one. I sort of lost count there.
Right.
And when you first I know you said that was the best offer you got when you came, but what did you think about the department and the inorganic group?
Well, the department obviously had been growing at that stage. I was very much impressed with the group that became known as the 49ers. Mm-hmm. I got to know them. It was a very dynamic organization. And so they had not only the people that looked like it was a moving department that I was interested in, but also they had the equipment that was suitable for my particular research that I had chosen to do. And it was a bit of a specialized organometallic chemistry, but it required certain kinds of instrumentation, which this department had, and a number of the other departments that gave me job offers did not have. This was not the financially most rewarding offer, but it was, and certainly not financially rewarding relative to my industrial salary.
Yes.
But it was a challenge that I was looking forward to.
Because you were especially interested in the research, and the research facilities were here.
Yes.
Plus you wanted to do the teaching.
Yes.
And the South was appealing after Buffalo.
That's quite correct. The South, and the fact that you can play tennis in January on a good day, that was good too.
Yeah, that's right. We used to play tennis.
Yes.
Now, I know you've mentioned the department's strengths. It was the research facilities, but what were the weaknesses at that point? If you can remember that far back, 1962, it's a long time ago.
In terms of knowing I didn't know what an extremely strong department would be like, so relative to the weaknesses, I would say there were not too many, considering that this was not a Harvard or Stanford or whatever, relative to a state university. I don't think it really had any major weaknesses.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, there are a lot of things that yet we could have relative to instrumentation, and many of the things are now present. Money then, as today, always was a battle. Mm-hmm. Money for salaries then, as today, is still a battle. But weaknesses in terms of major shortcomings, I don't think it had them.
Wonderful.
What's impressive to me was that within a couple of years, the department was ranked, I don't remember whether it was 23rd or 24th in the nation.
I remember, it went up very quickly.
And of course I would like to take credit for that, but my predecessors really did all of that.
The 49ers.
The
especially.
49ers, mm-hmm. Yes.
So when you came, then you did this organometallic research. Who were the people that you collaborated with or that you were closest to professionally?
There was not much by way of collaboration in the department at that stage. Ray Sheeline, a little bit. But perhaps if there is a weakness in the department, go back to your question earlier, or a shortcoming, at that time, if you'll pardon the way I'm going to express this, my colleagues felt that every man should be an island unto himself.
Yeah, I remember
Pardon
that.
the gender part.
No, I knew what you meant.
But collaboration was frowned upon, and it's only been in more recent years that collaborations have become not only acceptable but almost demanded.
Yes.
Because of the complexity of things, but they were not. And so there was very little collaboration at the time. If I did 90% of a project and a senior colleague did 10% of a project and we published together, the philosophy at the time was that relative to my promotion and my tenure or things of this sort, it would not be counted because of the 10% work that had been done by a senior colleague. So you tended not to collaborate.
It was that way even when I came in 77. Yes. So I know just what you mean, but I'm glad you voiced it.
The changing of collaboration, I think, has been one of the best changes in the department over the years.
I agree. So in the beginning, it was mainly, your colleagues were mainly, some collaboration, a tiny bit with Ray. But how did it evolve over time? I know now you collaborate a lot, and now that you're even retired, you still work and collaborate extensively.
I do far more collaboration now that I've taken up crystallography as my retirement. I call it a hobby, but it's a very, very serious hobby. So I do far more collaboration now than I did at the time. In my original research in metal carbonyl chemistry and a narrow area of that, trifluorophosphine aspects of it, I became unquestionably the world's expert in this chemistry. I'm literally saying the world's expert. One slight failing in all of this, I never convinced anybody of the granting agency type that expertise was really worth major support. So it was an expertise, yes, a supportable expertise in this time of things tending more and more toward applied research. It was not that kind of collaboration, that kind of a research effort. So I enjoyed it very much, and I had a lot of very, very good students that came out of this program. But in terms of contribution to science as a whole, probably what I'm doing after retirement is making better contributions than what I did before, because it was my own failing, if you want to call it that I made it so narrow in the process of getting this world's expert. It was just too narrow, and it wasn't necessarily a wise choice on my part.
So who were your collaborators? How did they evolve through the years? And I know, so it was mainly...
Inside or outsider you're talking about?
Both.
Most of my collaborators in this field were outside. Typically people in Europe. A gentleman by the name of Nixon in Sussex, Harry Croto's home institution, and other people of this sort. There was a fair amount of collaboration outside, but not that much inside. I published a couple of papers with Ray Sheeline, but most of my collaboration had been in the crystallography field, and in the last, say, 10 years. So there wasn't not that much collaboration. In terms of communication, and a lot of that took place with my colleagues like Ed Mellon, Barry Garrett. Barry Garrett was really a good person to bounce a physical question off of. He would give me a good explanation, send me off to the literature to read, and he had been spot on in terms of his explanation and where my problem might go. So a lot of questions of this sort, but in terms of actual research collaboration, very little within the department until recent years.
How about it now in recent years? With whom do you collaborate now?
Now,
Since you're retired.
I would say 2/3 of the organic division, and people like Naresh, Croto, others in the physical division, anybody who needs a small molecule crystal problem done, anybody in the department that needs crystallography work other than Mike Shatrack, who does his own with his group, and Susan LaTurner, who does her own with her own group. But anybody else in the department that needs crystallography work or outside. Norris Hoffman, I've done work for him when he was, before he retired, and other people of that sort. Not too often, but I do collaboration with people outside the department, but mostly within.
Wow, that's good.
Anybody who grows a crystal
And wants it.
and needs a structure, I'm willing to give it a try.
Wonderful. How about your graduate students? I know you said that, obviously they were before you retired and that they did very well. How many did you have?
I have a list here, but I think it would be about 15 PhDs over the years. Most of them took very good jobs. Quite a number of them are by now retired or retiring. Many of them retired. And they worked mostly, well, I would say quite a bit in industry, but I would say 5 or 6 of them are in academic institutions. Mariana Bush was the chairman of the department at Baylor for many years, and others in academic institutions.
I know I've met at least 2 people in town that graduated with you. One is I forget his initials, but he worked at the department, the pest control.
J.D. Warren.
Yeah, J.D.
You're right. He was fairly high in the ag department. I couldn't tell you exactly what he did. And then, of course, Tom Gedris, who worked in our department, was one of my students. I think one of my favorite ones was Carl Udovich, my first student. He was the best man at my wedding, number 1, and he has the interesting history of he never really left his roots on the farm. And when I met him about 6 months ago over dinner, I said jokingly, well, I understand that you've made quite a bit more money farming than you have as a professional chemist. And he didn't give me a straight answer other than, oh yes, very much so. So he buys up a lot of good corn growing property in Illinois.
I see.
And has done very well as a farmer, as well as a professional chemist.
Wow. I know there's another man in town I met recently. I met him at one of these World War II lectures that I mentioned to you, that with Jim Jones as the lecturer. I have his number in my phone, but I'll have to look it up. But he said, he had been your... maybe,
Ralph Cottrell, by chance.
Well, yes, it was Ralph.
Okay, Ralph got a master's degree with me and went on to work in the crime lab. And I believe he was chief, or nearly so, of a federal crime lab in Chicago until he retired.
Yeah, he's a man.
And so he's the brother of the Raymond Cottrell who's been so generous to the department.
Yes, he told me that his brother has a lot more money.
Yes, he did quite well in his internal organ. Let's see, I can't remember.
Internal medicine?
Internal medicine, but not internal medicine, having to do with colonoscopies and all kinds of good stuff like that.
I see.
I just soon stay away from it, if you don't mind.
But you're fine if he comes to the department.
Right. Oh yes, he's been very generous with us.
I know, he has that
person.
Cottrell professorship.
Which I held for several years.
Yeah. Now, with your getting back to the graduate students, you said there's roughly 15. I know some of them were women.
Yes, about half.
About half are women. That's very good. I remember some of them. I'll have to look at your list to remember their names.
Right. Mariana Bush, for instance, and anyway,
Yeah.
we have the list. Off Winsky, Mariana Bush, Janet Cottrell, Grace Schwartz, Elizabeth Denham, Paula Rupert. These are not all PhDs. Deborah Woolley, Cynthia Hamill.
Oh, I remember Cynthia. I think I was on her committee.
Right.
I mean, I think.
We were all on a lot of committees
Yes.
as members.
Doctoral committees.
Right. So I would say about half of my graduates, both masters and PhD.
That's very
We're
good,
female.
because that was unusual back then.
Yes, it was.
Believe me, I know. So of all the research you've done, I know you said there's been more impact now, but what do you think is the most important research you've done?
I would suppose the most important work was to demonstrate for the first time that a 5-coordinate complex could undergo what they call a Berry pseudo-rotation, that is, invert itself internally without bond breaking. Mm-hmm. And it was a very hotly debated issue, and one of my compounds was the first one to be able to show this by NMR. Mm-hmm.
So
as you did variable temperature NMR to show that it would be a average structure at high temperature and individual species at low temperature, mm-hmm. and all of this taking place without bond breaking. Mm-hmm. Probably that would be my...
What was the name? So it was one of the phosphorus ones?
Yes, it was a cobalt compound, PF3, and containing carbonyls. Mm-hmm. And so it had a change of temperature range. Most of the complexes would be moving so rapidly that you couldn't slow them. You couldn't go to low enough temperature and still have them in solution for the NMR that was then available. By modern NMR, I think more could be done, but mm-hmm. With the NMR that was then available, you couldn't get to low enough temperature to slow down the motion.
But you could with your molecule.
I could with mine. I happened to hit the right one. But in any event, all of that chemistry was very, very interesting and intriguing, but I will not claim that I shook up the history of chemistry from that point of view. Just being honest.
Yep. Well, that's good. So what do you... I know that you came to the South. What did you like about Tallahassee? Besides the university.
What I liked about Tallahassee at the time was that it was a small community. I grew up in a very small town in Oklahoma. I wanted to get something bigger, but I never wanted to be the big city. You couldn't have taken me to Chicago or New York City or Los Angeles in any way. So I wanted something medium-sized, and Tallahassee was the size I wanted. Mm-hmm. And it grew up and became more sophisticated, and it grew up and became too big, as far from my point of view. But that was what I really liked, and that it wasn't a town that was just sort of never-ending suburb on suburb on suburb. Yep. That you could drive east, west, north, or south, and not too much time you're out in the country. Mm-hmm. Even though it has gotten rather big in the meantime. I think that's what I really like about Tallahassee.
Yeah, and then nature, I know you like.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Gloria Jehoda's book, referring to Tallahassee as, what did she say, 150 miles from anywhere.
Yeah.
That described the town very nicely, and is what I liked.
Yeah, I remember when I first came getting on top of the Capitol, it was like we were an island with trees around us.
Yes. Well, you get up on top of the Capitol and start looking at an angle, and you don't know that there are all those houses out there.
I know, because there's so many trees. That's another thing I like about the city.
There's a few more trees than in Oklahoma.
I bet. I know, the next question has to do with administrative duties. I know you were associate chair for many, many years.
Right.
How many years was it?
6 years with Rob Lee Light.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me quite a number of things in terms of dealing with administrative problems. It also taught me that I didn't really want to go higher in the administration. I never had any ambition to become chairman of the department or become a lower level dean in arts and sciences or anything of this sort. I was quite happy in the lab and quite happy in the classroom. And that would be my preferred life.
Mm-hmm. So
I thought
you did well at the job.
I originally thought of myself at a much younger age as, you give me a lab, give me a dumbwaiter to send me the chemicals and the supplies, and ever so often I'll send you out a report, but leave me alone. Well, I didn't stay that kind of isolated person, but still I never did want to become a high-level administrator.
Mm-hmm.
And being associate chairman, though I think I did a pretty good job at it, that's as far as I wanted to go.
Now, I know with teaching you did extremely well, and you got the University Teaching Award.
I got the University Teaching Award twice, and then the Cottrell.
And you probably got the TIP Award too.
Yes.
For teaching.
Yes. I mean, there weren't that many. There are more awards now than there were then, but the teaching turned out to be a very satisfying part of my life.
I know when I meet people and they say, "Oh, how's Ron?" I tell them, but then they say he was such a good teacher.
Being a good teacher and being a good researcher
I'm just talking
come
about the
into
teaching.
conflict, and
I'm just talking about the teaching.
I know, but I'm just simply saying that they do come in conflict, and when they came in conflict, the teaching got my attention more.
Mm-hmm. Because it's important.
Mm-hmm. I always considered it important. Not all my colleagues did.
I did too.
Right.
And we did talk already about your awards, and you've done very well in the department. And it's amazing. How many years have you been retired? Oh, you retired the same year that Sanford did.
Did I?
Yeah.
I know Robley and I did, and Marty Schwartz retired. Charlie Mann, if he'd survived, would have done that year. And in any event, in my case, it's a little over 10 years.
Yeah.
I guess it must have been in 2004. I was on the faculty for 42 years, came in 62, and so it would have been 2004. So
maybe because Sanford
over 10
retired
years.
after that, so
Right.
it must have been.
I think he came a year or two later.
Yeah.
He retired a year or two later.
Mm-hmm.
But there are two types of people in the department, in the retirement world. Those who disappear into the woodwork, and you see them only at a party occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And then those like myself, I jokingly say that the chairman throws me out the front door and I find an open back door and come sneaking back in when he's not looking. Chemistry is that much of my life that I still want to do chemistry.
And you do.
And the crystallography is extremely well suited for it because I don't have to fund the project that produces the crystal. And the department owns the diffractometer, even though I'm its mother hen. It's just a perfect thing for me to do. And I can be at home with good computer equipment and do a lot of the work there if I'm not doing it at my office, talking to students. I still get to be involved very much with graduate students because they come to see me and I typically explain to them what I'm doing, what I'm up to. So I still get some of the teaching aspects in my life, as well as the research, and so I'm quite happy with it until they take it away from me.
Well, I doubt they'll take it away from you.
I hope not. I hope not.
Well, thank you, Ron.
You're quite welcome.
You did a
Thank you
great
for
job
doing it.
of explaining, and I'm glad you're still doing so much for the department.
You're quite welcome.